Welcome to the official podcast at ContentChampion.com. Join our heroic quest to discover truly epic content. Introducing your host, the Content Champion himself, Los James.
Hi guys, welcome to Content Champion Podcast 1. I'm very excited to be on with John Lee Dumas today, the founder and host of Entrepreneur On Fire.com, a daily podcast that interviews today's most inspiring and successful entrepreneurs. Entrepreneur On Fire highlights the journey of each guest, sharing their early failures, aha moments, and insights into what is working for them now and why. Every show ends with a 5-question lightning round that pulls priceless nuggets of information from these incredibly successful entrepreneurs. Thank you very much, John, for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Lars.
Okay, before we get into the questions about specific content, can I just ask you a bit about your background and why you started Entrepreneur On Fire, please?
Yeah, I'd love to share it. I was born back here in the state of Maine and went to college on a ROTC scholarship. So I spent 4 years as a college student having fun, but also training as a cadet. So when I graduated at 22, I was in the Army as an officer for 4 years, spent 13 months in Iraq, and just was stationed in a lot of places, both domestically and overseas. And at 26, I was out of the Army, so I was time to get in the real world. So I tried corporate finance. I tried commercial and residential real estate. I got in with a tech startup and just kind of bumped around trying to find my passion a little bit. And it's not an easy thing to do, as most people know. But one day when I had my aha moment, I realized I just wanted to create Entrepreneur On Fire to inspire other people. I've been going with a head full of steam ever since, and it's just been a great journey, Lars.
And your work ethic, I mean, you've already got, I think it's 137 podcasts on the site already. I think you've recorded hundreds already.
Yeah, I've recorded over 180 at this point. I like to stay about 2 months ahead. And yeah, it really comes down to work ethic, like you said. I mean, it's one thing I learned in the military was just being disciplined and have a schedule and stick to it. And if you really do maintain that discipline, it's not terribly difficult to maintain a daily podcast.
Okay, well, Content Champion is all about highlighting excellence in content production, which is why I'm talking to you. So what single piece of content, or perhaps looking at the podcast in totality, what's been the most successful for you, you're the most proud of?
Well, I'm very proud of the podcast in general, as far as just the listenership that it's gained in such a short period of time. Entrepreneur On Fire, as we're speaking, Laws, in early March here, is getting over 150,000 unique downloads every single month in over 140 countries. It's consistently a top 15 podcast in iTunes, which is the big elephant in the room. I mean, they dominate the podcasting world as far as where people go to consume that type of content. So to be a top 15 business podcast in iTunes pretty much means you're the top 15 business podcast in the world, which I'm very proud of because it puts me next to the likes of Susie Orman, just APN Marketplace, Wall Street Journal, Dave Ramsey. So I've just had a lot of fun with that, and just with the continued reach of Entrepreneur On Fire, because one of the beauties of doing a daily show is that every day when a new podcast goes live, that spotlighted entrepreneur is turning to their audience and saying, hey, check out my story, listen to my journey. And it's just opening up a whole new realm of potential Entrepreneur On Fire advocates to my brands.
I mean, it's an incredible achievement. I mean, that's some track record in a relatively short space of time. You talked about the target audience. Why do you think, obviously it's unique, it's a daily podcast, why do you think the content has resonated so well with them? What specifically about the content do you think is really drawing people in?
I love that question, Laws. And for me, it was just the fact that I was that person. I was driving around in prior jobs, commuting to work 35, 45 minutes every single day, hating the radio, not liking talk radio, getting bored of the commercials, and finally being turned on to podcasts and saying, wow, this is a great way to get on-demand, passionate, targeted content. And the problem that I found with podcasts were that, hey, I'm driving 30 minutes one way to work every day, or I'm at the gym every single day on the treadmill for 30 minutes. I'm going through these weekly podcasts like a knife goes through soft butter. I mean, I'm running out of content incredibly fast. There's a podcaster who I loved who produced one podcast every 2 weeks. I went through his 2 years of content in about 2 months. And I was like, man, there's definitely a niche out there for when somebody wakes up in the morning that they know there's going to be a great, fresh, new podcast waiting for them. And to get to your specific part of the question, I knew what I wanted. I really loved those podcasts that hit upon the journey, that told the story of that entrepreneur so I could see what they felt when they just started their journey. Because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to start my journey, and I didn't really understand how they got from point A to point Z, and point Z being they're successful entrepreneurs now. Well, I understand they're successful, but how'd they get there? So I wanted Entrepreneur on Fire to focus on that A, B, and C part of their journey, when they failed, when they were despaired, when they came up against challenges and obstacles, and then when they had that aha moment, and how did they turn that aha moment into success? And that's why I set up Entrepreneur on Fire in that format.
It's very exciting, actually. There's such a sort of voracious appetite for daily content. It proves that people, want to learn, and they've got the sort of capacity, if you like, to eat up everything you can feed to them, as it were. In terms of your strategy with, producing content every day, how does that pan out? Because you're obviously starting with giving away some fantastic free information.
I totally believe it's about the size of the audience. And I had MJ DeMarco on my show at one point, and his quote, which I start every show off with, is my guest favorite success quote, was, if you want to make millions, you need to help millions. And I've really just believed that's a great way to look at things, especially this day and age with the internet and its massive reach, not just regionally, not just locally, but around the world. And so for Entrepreneur on Fire, I adopted that and said, hey, if I eventually want to make millions, I need to eventually inspire millions. So since that day, my goal has been to inspire millions, to grow my audience, to just produce the highest quality possible, to keep people coming back for more, to tell their friends about it, and just to continue to be found organically by being ranked so highly in places like iTunes, like Stitcher Radio, like the BlackBerry app.
Now, I've only been on this call for about 7 minutes with you, but you've obviously got a very positive and infectious personality.
Thank you.
How much of that do you bring to your content? Are people buying into you, or are they buying into your blog? Or is it a bit of both?
Well, I hope it's a bit of both, because I really believe at the beginning, Laws, it was about 0% buying into me and 100% buying into the great entrepreneurs that I was able to basically force and con onto my show by just saying, please give me 25 minutes. I promise I'll make it worth your while. Because, like everybody else, when they start something for the first time, you suck. Like, you're just bad. You're not good. And that was me. I mean, listen, I'm an Army officer. I fought in Iraq. I mean, I never had a microphone. I was never trying to be a personality online, but at 32 years old, I found my passion, and I knew that I wasn't, just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean you're good at it. Yeah. And so I look back at the first 20, 40, 60 episodes of Entrepreneur on Fire, and I cringe. And, my girlfriend even came in yesterday and she was like, man, I listened to one of your old episodes and you sounded nervous. And I was like, I wasn't good on. And, I'm still, I've gone to the point now where I feel like I'm okay. Like, I can hold my own. And I know that every time I get on the mic, whether it be me interviewing people or being interviewed like today, I'm taking another small step forward in some regard. But I was bad at the beginning, and, my guests had to carry the show. But, as that's gone forward, I've really felt like that's kind of been coming, like the seesaw has kind of been going back and forth a little bit, where now people do come to hear me and to hear my thoughts and responses to different answers that I'm getting from my guests, because now I'm starting to come out of my shell and offer those up. And at the same time, it's been endearing, because I've had a lot of people that have reached out to me and said, John, like, I've always loved the guests that you brought on, and it's great to see your progression as an interviewer, because you were not good at first and you're getting better. And we love to see that. We feel like we're kind of growing with you as listeners. And that's something that people really can take away from that part of my business, is that, hey, don't wait until you're good at something, because you're never going to be good enough in your mind.
Sure.
Just start and you'll get better.
Is that your confidence has evolved, and your content marketing strategy has evolved with it then, really, is what you're saying? You're saying that, as you've got better, the content's got better, and perhaps the rapport between you and your interviewees has become more successful as you've gone on. So if you like, you've become the expert that's, you were interviewing in the first place, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that way. And as I've just gotten more comfortable in my own skin and with podcasting in general, and just kind of become an expert in this area. I mean, just recently I launched my first book on the Amazon platform, Podcast Launch, and I've had people read it and they've been like, wow, John, I've learned so much from this book. And for me, I think back to when I started, I never would have thought I would have been able to write something that people would have gotten anything out of, because I never thought I would have had those skills. But if you just immerse yourself in a subject that you love and you're passionate about, and you just try to wake up every morning and learn something, then you're going to find yourself 6 months later, a year later, just a master of that domain in certain senses.
Okay, so that kind of feeds into my next question, really. What's the best advice you could give to my readers in terms of gaining the most possible leverage from your content marketing efforts? Obviously, your strategy seems to fit in with Pat Flynn's sort of be everywhere type of philosophy. Is that something you're sort of following with podcasts 5 days a week and, really getting out there on multiple channels?
I definitely believe that if you start with the quality, you really need to always start with quality. And I know that everybody's heard that on certain levels, but it is so true. And I'm finding that to be the case over and over again. Once you've created that quality product, then you want to be everywhere, because as long as you are on that touchstone of quality, of great content, then when people find you, and I like to use the word sticky, it's sticky. Like they stick to you, like they keep coming back for more. They tell their friends about you. And I just am a big believer in that be everywhere philosophy. When you are in those places, people are having a good impression of your brand, of what you're bringing to the table.
Okay. So the flip side of that would be, what do you advise not to do when it comes to content marketing strategy to putting together quality content?
Well, there's a lot that I would advise not to do. The main things I would advise not to do is to be scared. Don't be scared to not start. Like, don't let your fears take over and say, oh, this article is not good enough. This article is not of high enough quality. I mean, like I said, it goes back to quality. It needs to be great quality, but it needs to be the best quality that you're capable of at the time. Like when I started Entrepreneur on Fire, the quality was a lot lower than it is now, but it was as high a quality as I was capable of at the time. And it allowed me to improve, and it allowed me to get feedback. And that's another thing I would definitely say to that point is, don't ever shy away from feedback, and don't ever be afraid or stop asking for feedback from people who are reaching out to you, from your listeners. I mean, feedback from your mother or feedback from your girlfriend or your wife is only so valuable. It's feedback from people that are out there that found you organically that's incredibly valuable. And I've gotten emails from people that have said, John, I enjoy your podcast because you bring on great guests, but there's some issues I have with you, and I don't want to post this review on iTunes because I feel like it's kind of mean, but here's what I would have posted on iTunes.
Really?
And
so you've had that. I mean, that's quite, that's a bit of a leveler, isn't it? For people coming back, and what are they giving you tips on your presentation and things like that?
Absolutely. They're just bringing it. I had one that was, probably 1,000 words. The guy must have spent an hour on it, just really going over and critiquing everything about me and my interview and Entrepreneur on Fire in general. And you can look at it in two ways. You can let it get you down, and you can really kind of hum and haw about it, or you can just really take it as a learning tool. And I really did, discard some of the things that he said, but I really took some notes on some of the things, and I have a little sticky by my computer now that I look at before each interview, and I say, okay, these are a couple things that you're going to really try to avoid doing during this interview, because if this guy was bold enough to say it, it's probably annoying. And then you can kind of pick it up when you go back and listen when somebody points it out. So it's great to get constructive criticism. And again, you need to look at it as constructive. You're always going to have a certain percent of people who are going to love you unabashedly, and they're going to just always just praise you and give you compliments. And you're always going to have the other segment of people, no matter what you do, who are going to bash you. And you really need to take some of that bashing and then some of the people in the middle and just really try to draw out the constructive criticism from there to improve.
Wow. So it's, develop a thick skin, stay positive, kind of be the best person that you can be at any moment in time, and keep learning and take everything on board.
And when it's just really negative stuff, Laws, you just got to chalk it up as some people are just haters. Chalk it down to experience, and you can't let it get you down, because some people feel like they need to bring other people down to bring themselves up. And that's what you got to chalk that up as.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll forget them. So
forget about them.
Moving on to the specifics of each podcast, each piece of content that you produce. How are you measuring the success of that? Do you use some sort of analytics package, or is it social shares? How are you monitoring how successful that content is?
One of the greatest things about podcasting are how great the analytics are. When you upload your piece of audio to your media host, who I use is called Libsyn, which is short for Liberated Syndication, you literally get downloads to the exact number. So I can bring up my stats from yesterday and see that just yesterday I got 7,134 downloads. Wow. Because what people need to realize is that like places like iTunes and Stitcher Radio, those are just directories where people stream your audio from their RSS feed. And so that's all coming from one place, from your quote unquote media host where that MP3 file is living. And because of that, you can get some incredible statistics. And so I know every single day, every single week, every single month, what my exact downloads are for that time frame. And I can see how different entrepreneurs or different guests that I have on the show, how their fans or how their audience reacts to a show by the boosting of the ratings.
So I'm looking at your ebook at the moment, which is a great read, the 10 incredible insights from 10 incredible entrepreneurs. I notice, again, coming back to Pat Flynn, I think it was the Blog Expo, you were featured in his Power of Free presentation, and he mentioned doing something like this with, I think, insights from some of your top interviewees, and it's a really inspiring read.
Absolutely, yeah. That was kind of a funny, quick story with Pat Flynn, is that he asked for volunteers at the end of his speech to come up, and he said, John, your free giveaway isn't that great right now. It's really important to build your email list. You've interviewed hundreds of incredible entrepreneurs. Why don't you take the 10 best tips? And a week later, I had that up, and it's been great. And I've gotten a great response, because you're right. It's just a short ebook with the 10 top insights from 10 incredible entrepreneurs. So, I've got a really good response from that. And where people can find that specifically is at my headquarters, which is EntrepreneurOnFire.com. Or for those of you that can't spell entrepreneur like me, because that word is super tricky, it's EOFire.com. We'll get you to the same place. And the iTunes is really the place to find Entrepreneur on Fire. You just go to the iTunes store, podcast, type in either my name, John Lee Dumas, or just Entrepreneur on Fire in general. And if you're not a Mac person or an iTunes person, the best way to stream podcasts these days is through Stitcher Radio. They are out there. They're doing some great things. They just inked deals with all the major car companies. So they're going in the dashboard of all the major car companies rolling out in 2014. So just like you can turn to Sirius XM Radio in your Ford dashboard, you're going to be able to turn to Entrepreneur on Fire the same way.
The technology is fantastic, isn't it?
It's exciting.
Well, John, look, I'm really, really grateful for you coming on. It's been really inspirational. Your phenomenal success in such a relatively short amount of time. Those stats you're pulling on your podcast and on your site are absolutely fantastic. And I wish you every success with Entrepreneur on Fire in future.
Laws, it's been a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire. This has been Content Champion podcast number 1. You'll find future editions of this podcast on my website and on iTunes. So please leave me a review if you've liked what you've heard. I'm Los James. Thanks for listening.